Hi guys! Many people talk about the Budapest Memorandum as justification for Russia's war in Ukraine. This is of course Russian propaganda and is totally wrong. So it's important to understand what the Budapest Memorandum actually is. In this video, I'm going to explain what it is and how it shows that Russia has deeply betrayed Ukraine. My name is Maria and I make videos to share the culture, history and politics of Ukraine so that you too can learn about my beautiful country. Please feel free to subscribe to my channel so I can continue making videos for you. Okay, so first, what is the Budapest Memorandum? The Budapest Memorandum is an agreement that the ex-Soviet states, Belarus, Ukraine and Kazakhstan, agreed to give up their nuclear weapons in exchange for security assurance and protection provided by Russia, the US and the UK. The agreement was a significant milestone in Ukraine's history and was signed in December 1994 in Budapest. One of the key points of the memorandum prohibits the US, UK or Russia from invading, attacking or using military force against Ukraine, Belarus and Kazakhstan, except in case of self-defense, and that Ukraine, Belarus and Kazakhstan give up at their all nuclear weapons. For the purpose of this video, I will focus on Ukraine. Some of you may not know that at the end of this USSR, Ukraine had thousands of nuclear weapons. In fact, after Russia and the US, it had the third large collection of nuclear weapons in the world. Guys, what do you think? Should Ukraine have given up its nuclear weapon? Please leave your comment below. Now there is more to this. As though the weapons were physically present in Ukraine, Ukraine did not have operational control of them. Formally, that control belonged to the Commonwealth of Independent States, otherwise known as CIS countries, basically ex-USSR countries. In reality, though, the operational control was with the Russian Federation. However, this was not a guarantee that Ukraine could not use the nuclear weapons. If Ukraine had wanted, it would have been able to find a way to get operational control over some of them. Formally, these weapon systems were controlled by CIS, but practically were controlled by Russian Federation. For Ukraine, the upkeep of the weapons was costly and it did not have the right resources to ensure that the weapons could remain stable and secure. And for this reason, it felt that it would be advantageous to start the process of denuclearizing itself. The negotiations for the Budapest Memorandum started much before 1994. In fact, as early as 1992, something called the Lisbon Protocol was signed between the US, Ukraine, Kazakhstan and Belarus. Ukraine would become a non-nuclear state and the US would provide significant financial and technical assistance to Ukraine in return. But even after signing the Lisbon Protocol, many in Ukraine were against the idea of giving up the nuclear weapons. And in 1993, there was a lot of negotiations on this. On the one hand, Ukraine was concerned about its security and what its population think. On the other hand, there were significant incentives to give up weapons. Initially, Ukraine agreed to give up some weapons and sign a series of bilateral agreements with Russia in 1992-93, and in return received fuel for nuclear power reactors. The same nuclear power reactors that Russia threatens today, by the way. And that Russia would write off the Ukraine's debt for Russian oil and gas. See, even far back then, in 1992 and 1993, Russia was using oil and gas as political leverage, but I guess no one saw it back then. Next, the US, Russia and Ukraine became to further making three-way agreements. As a part of these agreements, as long as Ukraine would give up all its nuclear warheads, Russia would produce nuclear fuel for Ukraine, and the US would provide significant financial and technical assistance in hundreds of millions of dollars. The technical assistance was to decommission the nuclear warheads safely and securely, as well as to help with energy production. To demonstrate the importance of this Trilateral Agreement, in late 1993, US President Bill Clinton visited Moscow, and to stop last-minute cold feet in Ukraine, also visited Kiev. His purpose was simple. He needed to emphasize how important the Trilateral Agreement was to US and the support Ukraine would get from the US when they signed the agreement. It was a successful trip, as the agreement between Ukraine, Russia and the US was signed in Moscow in January 1994. Specific details at that time were not made public, but we know now included Ukraine giving up all its weapons, and what assistance exactly would be provided from the US and Russia. Okay, so this is the background to the Budapest Memorandum. There is huge amounts of detailed information for each of these agreements and steps, like the Lisbon Protocol, the bilateral agreement with Russia and Ukraine, and even the trilateral agreement between Ukraine, Russia and the US. And I encourage you to look into it, as it's a transformative period for relations between Ukraine and the West. Okay, so now let's actually take a look at the memorandum itself. Well, after years of negotiation, the memorandum was finally signed in December 1994 in Budapest and focused on what Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan would get in return for giving up their nukes. And the same agreement was signed with Ukraine, Belarus and Kazakhstan. The memorandum is short and only 6 points long. First, respect Belarusian, Kazakh and Ukrainian independence and sovereignty within the existing borders. Second, refrain from the threat or the use of force against Belarus, Kazakhstan or Ukraine. Next, refrain from using economic pressure on Belarus, Kazakhstan or Ukraine to influence their politics. Fourth, seek immediate Security Council action to provide assistance to Belarus, Kazakhstan or Ukraine if they should become a victim of an act of aggression or an object of a threat of aggression in which nuclear weapons are used. Fifth, refrain from the use of nuclear arms against Belarus, Kazakhstan or Ukraine. And the last one, consult with one another if questions arise regarding those commitments. That's it. Now let's quickly go through this. Point 1. Respect Ukrainian independence and sovereignty within existing borders. Well, Russia annexed Crimea and have been funding a war since 2014, so they broke the first point. Point 2. Refrain from the threat of force against Ukraine. Well, they broke that with the Crimea annexation and also with funding a proxy war in the Donbass. There is many other examples of these as well, but I won't go into that, so that's point 2, broken. Point 3. Refrain from using economic pressure on Ukraine to influence their politics. Not sure if you heard, but the Kremlin has spent billions in preparation for the invasion started on February 24th to bribe Ukrainian traitors to make sure Russia's invasion smooth. So that's point 3, broken as well. Point 4. Seek immediate Security Council action to provide assistance when Ukraine be threatened with nuclear weapons. Well, if you have been following the Russia war in Ukraine, you will see the running joke where Russia basically threatens the use of nuclear weapons on a daily basis. So that's point 4, broken as well. Point 5. Refrain from the use of nuclear weapons against Ukraine. Well, fortunately, they haven't broken this yet, but they are holding a nuclear power plant hostage, so we will count that as half broken. Point 6. Consult with other signatories of the Budapest Memorandum if questions arise to other points. Well, Russia consulted only Russia and I guess Belarus before invading Ukraine, so we can count that as broken as well. Now, some of the justification that Russia has given for annexing Crimea includes claiming in 2014 that the US had broken the memorandum by inciting the Euromaidan protests. I will talk about those in another video. Obviously, there is no evidence provided for this, so we are expected to take them at their word. Further, Russia claimed that because of those Euromaidan protests, there was a new Ukraine and the Budapest Memorandum was signed with old Ukraine. It makes no sense, but that's a part of the justifications the Russians have given for 2022 invasion. I'm not even kidding. Of course, Russia 100% broke the memorandum by annexing Crimea in 2014 and then by funding a war in Luhansk and Donetsk. And if Russia and Putin truly believed that the US had broken the memorandum by influencing or threatening Ukrainian politics, Russia was obligated to protect Ukraine, not annex Crimea. This is like you are saying, he shot you, so I'm going to shoot you too to protect you from him. Now, that's not as clear as the role of the US and the UK, which gave security assurance, not guarantees. This is a difference between sending weapons and military supporting Ukraine by sending soldiers. The memorandum was also not ratified in Congress by the US, so it's not a legally binding treaty. But the point of the video is not to share blame, but rather highlight the fact that Russia has broken every single promise it made to Ukraine in the worst possible way. Ukraine gave up nuclear warheads for the promise that Russia would protect us. Instead, it annexed Crimea, attacked Donbass, and is currently trying to destroy most of Ukraine. Many Russian supporters actually try to use Budapest Memorandum as a justification for Russia's war in Ukraine. But if you're familiar with the background and the 6 points in the memorandum, it is critical clear that Russia has betrayed Ukraine in the worst possible way. Do you guys think that anyone can ever negotiate with Russia? Please let me know in comments. As always, thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe and hit like button. Slava Ukraini! So it's important to understand what the bad memorandum